Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. And I'm glad to see a lot of you in the chat already. Thank you for being here. And my guest today is Michelle Gibson. And I know you're all excited to hear Michelle and learn more of her too. And Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Carla. I'm glad to be here and appreciate your invitation today.
Uh,
I understand it's your solo broadcast.
it is, yeah, it's exciting for me. I'm happy, and it's so exciting that you're the first one. I mean, that's awesome. I really, I really love it. I'm going to read your bio here a little bit, just so anyone that doesn't know about you could know a little bit of your background. Michelle Gibson was fascinated by megaliths most of her life, and her journey has led her to uncovering the key to the truth. She found the star tetrahedron on the North American continent by connecting the dots of major cities and extended the lines outward. Then she wrote down the cities that lined up primarily in circular and linear fashion and got an amazing tour of the world of places she had never heard of, with remarkable similarities across countries. She firmly believes there would be no mysteries in history if we had only been told the truth. Very, very true. And the rest of your bio there is on down below for anyone to read. And usually, Michelle, I ask people just to tell their story, but I'd really love you. We talked a bit before the podcast just about our passion and our all of us as connected in this journey of life. And so, I'd love for you just to start with anything you especially want to tell us today.
Thank you, Carla. There's so much to say and I have so much to share about my journey, but what really comes to mind is first of all, I always encourage people to follow their intuition and their passions and ask questions and question the narrative. And not everybody has to do what we're doing and going public with what we what our passion is, but you don't have to go far to start seeing the evidence that's really literally all around us. You can probably go out your front door and start seeing big cut and shaped stones and things like that, because I started having a realization after I moved to Oklahoma in between 2012 and 2016, that there's this ancient civilization that's all around us. But not only does it go back far in the past, it was actually in existence up until relatively recently. And I got into this through megaliths. That was my interest, and got into ley lines and things like that. But there really was not much of information available, especially about ley lines, until the early 2000s. And I was always interested in hidden history from from childhood, and I love to watch Unsolved Mysteries or In Search of or Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. But again, there really wasn't that much.
Mhm.
And I was first introduced to Fingerprints of the Gods, which is Graham Hancock's book, and I think a lot of people, that was like an entryway for a lot of people into this like civilization in different parts of the world. And then, of course, with the internet, it opened up all this other information. And I was living in Fairbanks, Alaska when I really started to get the stream of information that my work is based on. But one of the things that happened around 2011 was I watched Megalithomania. And it's a conference that's organized by a dowser named Hugh Newman, and he had guests like Michael Tellinger and Klaus Dona, and Wayne Herschel has done some really intriguing work. Um, those are three that I can think of off the top of my head, but I watched all of their presentations, and I'm like, and because it was like what I wanted. And there were other books and things that came to my awareness when I was living in Fairbanks, um, that was speaking to this hidden information and this hidden civilization. And that was my foundation. And so when I watched Megalithomania, I just want to mention, because I know you do work with pendulums, is that dowsers brought a lot of this information about ley lines back,
Very cool.
and finding them, and showing the alignments and things like that.
Very cool. And
So
oh, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
You mentioned Oklahoma. My husband and I lived in Oklahoma, in eastern Oklahoma, for a year and a half or something. We were homesteading out there, and every time we drove by, we drove toward Poto, which was the largest town in eastern Oklahoma there, and there was this triangular thing, right? And we were just telling ourselves that has to be a pyramid under there. It has to be a pyramid. Is that one of the places in Oklahoma that you looked at?
Yeah, yes, it's near Spiro Mounds.
Hmm.
It's near Heavener Runestone State Park. It's near Talamina Ridge, and the Winding Stair area is near there. And you think of the word Winding Stair,
Yeah.
and that's where True Grit was filmed,
Ah,
at
I didn't
Winding
know that.
Stair.
Okay.
Um, you know, Hollywood has presented westerns as history,
Yeah.
and so generations of people grew up on Roy Rogers and John Wayne, and know all these characters, Hopalong Cassidy, and I mean they're like, that's that's what they watched. And so to them, that's the history of the West. And it's not. That's the Masonic propaganda
Mhm.
to give us the narrative that they wanted us to believe, that there was nothing here. But that's not true.
Right.
There was a civilization just like what you see in Europe, that's held up today, in
Right.
South America. It's like there are just a few places in the world that this highly advanced civilization still exists, pretty much intact, and it's held up as European, and it was actually part of this ancient Moorish Atlantean civilization that was very advanced. We were very advanced, beautiful, connected, and that's what the energy grid and the ley lines are really all about, because these advanced humans knew where they were, who they were, what they were doing here. It was spiritual. It was a spiritual journey to reconnect with our higher selves, our divine natures,
Hmm.
and each other. We weren't divided. We
Yeah.
weren't killing each other. That came in with a hijack of the timeline.
And when do you
And
think
and
that? Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't
no,
want to
and
interrupt you.
and I'll go into that. I think it was recent. I'm a believer that there was one long-lasting advanced civilization that was worldwide and interconnected through this energy grid, and that there was one massive, absolutely massive cataclysm and reset. So I think that it was
Mm.
deliberately caused. I think it was caused by dark forces that wanted to come in here and do what they're doing now,
No.
which was take over the grid system, take over everything, and bring us down to our worst version of ourselves, which we think is our nature,
Yeah,
but it's not.
it's not.
And so because they can't lay a finger on us as sovereign beings, as children of God, as sparks of God, as a fractal of the Creator, which I believe we are, and which I believe this. We're talking about ley lines, and I know from your work you experienced God. It's how everything's connected. It's how we're connected to each other and the Creator. And so what
Yeah.
these dark forces did was attack Earth through the grid system.
Wow.
And unfortunately, they got pretty far into their agenda, and they're looking to really mess us up
But totally. Yeah.
psychologically. And
Yeah.
and if you have messed up humans, you can control them.
Yeah.
And they got to a lot of people,
They have.
but they couldn't get to everybody.
Well, and
They tried.
they tried, and I don't think they understand the power of the human spirit because we're made of God, right? It's not just us, it's that God spirit in each of us that we're made of at the core. And I think they didn't realize that when they got into it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not in them. The creator is not in them. They're
Oh,
parasitic. This
okay.
consciousness is parasitic, so they need
Okay.
us to survive. So
Okay.
so we're literally a host. Our energy that we can't see, I don't have that gift. I know other people
Hmm.
do. We can't see our energy field.
Right. Right.
So, so essentially they're siphoning our energy in so many different ways, and that's what they did. When they came in, they destroyed the grid, they wiped off the original civilization off the face of the earth, they reset, they erased these advanced humans from our memories, gave us a false historical narrative, took credit for everything. They said, we did this. They did this through the Masonic lodges and other secret societies, through the um, hierarchy of the Catholic Church and the orders, the monastic, so-called monastic orders. Make everything sound wonderful, lovely. We're doing this. We're building this. We're doing this for the good of humanity. No, they were not.
Yeah. So,
And
it amazes me though um, how quickly that they rewrote history, right? Like, say my grandparents, they were born in 1904. My grandpa was, and it was like, even though the giant Airbuses, right, or the helium things were still being used, right, at that time, it's like they never knew anything about those, and you would think they should have, except for, of course, the Hindenburg, right, the
right,
story that the false story that everybody knew, I suppose.
yep. In my opinion, they basically, from the research that I've done, timeline research and so on and so forth, when they gave us the false narrative, and one of my earliest insights into this was they created a 3D time loop between the years 1492 and 1942, and 1717 is the midpoint year.
Oh.
And I researched that, and there's a
Huh.
lot of stuff happening in our narrative in 1717, including the formation of the Premier Grand Lodge of England, which was the first Freemasonic lodge. And they went in through the Masonic lodges. The Moorish Masons, the ancient Masons, were the ones that built everything, and they were called
Okay.
operational Masons.
Okay, so
And the
they were
Freemasons
replaced.
acknowledged that. They
They were
they they
replaced.
were they were infiltrated. Their Masonic
Oh,
lodges and everything were infiltrated. The Moorish Masons had 360 degrees. Freemasons have 33 degrees.
yeah.
And um, so you got 32nd and 33rd degrees that are Shriners. Of
Mhm.
those two, the 33rd degree know about the Moors. The 32nd aren't taught about that. And then below
Oh,
that, I mean, you've got everyday ordinary people who are Masons because
right.
dad was a Mason and all this other stuff. They were highly involved in this reset. And so were the Oddfellows and the Knights of Pythias and other fraternal orders that were active in the 19th century. I mean, they still exist. They're not resetting, but anyway, I think the top echelons of these groups know what's going on.
Right.
And then you've got, this so-called royalty. They took over. I mean, they came in and they inserted themselves into, they got a little bit of Stuart blood from the real King James, which I think our historical King James is a historical fabrication. I think there was a King James. I
Right.
just think they hung their new timeline on him.
Well, and the
And
same way with the Jews were replaced then too, or infiltrated, right? And they were replaced with a different group, the Germanic group instead of the old
it's all
ancient
part of
Hebrews,
the
right?
same. It's all part of the same coordinated effort.
Mhm.
And they call it a conspiracy. But if you call them out on it, they call you a conspiracy theorist
Well, of course. Yeah,
because
yeah.
they don't want us to see them. So they get in our heads. They've gotten our culture. They've given us their culture, and we're doing all these rituals all the time, serving their interests, and have no idea that we are. And then given us our belief systems, that we're all separate and they built everything, and so therefore the original people are savages and hunter gatherers when they were in fact the original builders. And so what they did, they turned everything upside down
Hmm.
in our world when
Yeah.
this happened, and they came in. And so the way I look at it, up to a certain year, the history that we're taught is fabricated. And it's, I think, sometime in the 1700s was when they started to build their new world and write themselves into the historical narrative. So within that, whoever's busy writing our history, and there's Scaliger, he's called the the father of modern chronology or something like that. And Flamenco talks about him, history, science, or fiction. Um, so you probably had a group of Jesuits, and they were highly involved in this, and the Franciscans were
Mhm.
too, and the Dominicans were involved with the Inquisition. And somehow we're taught in school that you know torturing people because they're not Orthodox Catholics is a normal thing.
Right.
That's what we're taught, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's what they were doing. You can find all of this information about what they were doing in the Inquisition, and
Yeah.
their instruments of torture. And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just
they were
finished up.
awful.
I just finished up a research piece that's going on YouTube this afternoon. I put it on Patreon last night because I got done with everything too late. It was like, okay, it's like it's a 2.5 hour piece, but it's like I had all these puzzle pieces, and I was looking at the Bronx because a lady had sent me pictures of the Bronx, and I was looking at Sydney because somebody sent me pictures from Sydney. And then all of a sudden, this just took on a life of its own with the research I'd already done, plus the research that came up in the process of doing this.
So is
Of
that on
doing it,
a blog or a video of it?
it's going to be both. It's currently
Okay.
on my blog, and it's this
Okay.
afternoon, like probably 1 p.m. my time, and I'm in
Okay.
Mountain Time.
I'll try to put
It'll be
the
up
link
on
to
YouTube.
that below. Okay. Awesome. Okay. I'll include
So
that.
so basically, where I'm going with this is, you find exactly the same kinds of things in the Bronx that you do in Sydney, Australia.
Mm.
Exactly the same things. Same
Wow.
architecture, same kind of history. And I have people that have connected with me that have really helped with my research, and my friend Aaron is one, and he's private person, private researcher, doesn't have a platform, and his work is so important. So he had been prompted to look at Kirkbride facilities, which are insane asylums that started in 1849, mid 19th century, which is when the reset really got underway in our narrative. Lots of stuff happening. Um, and between 1800 and 1900, but particularly in the mid 1800s. Lots
Well,
going
and there
on.
was a lot of religions that were organized during that time, right? The Mormons, I think, were organized then. The Seventh Day Adventists were.
It,
I'm sure
you know,
more.
this
Yeah.
this goes so deep in terms of what they've done here and how they've gotten into our heads. And when you think about the word denomination, you're splitting into smaller and smaller and
Hmm.
smaller.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because before I woke up to this advanced civilization, by 2012, I was awake to unity consciousness. That was part of my journey, was becoming awake to
Right.
our connectedness with all life everywhere.
Hmm.
I was there. I had gotten that information, but I was also learning these things that helped me understand about this civilization that was highly advanced. It was worldwide. It was laid out along the lines of sacred geometry. And I had learned about sacred geometry when I was living in Fairbanks. So I had that piece in my toolbox. And with I couldn't have come to where I am without any of these things. So it's like I got everything I needed to start putting it together. And then once I started doing
Right.
my own research, all this other stuff came out.
Hmm.
So I started with sacred geometry, ley lines, and the Moors.
Now, I
That's
have a
that's where
question.
my work started.
Yeah, and I have a question on the ley lines because I mean, you showed or I've seen where you were showing, how you connected the dots, basically drew the ley lines in between the major connections. Um, but like, my spiritual awakening, I've always been spiritual, but the awakening part to the unity consciousness, like you're talking about, has just been recent, like the last 5 or 6 years. And when I found the ley lines at my house that connect here in this room I'm sitting in, as at the vortex where the ancestors transition from, it's like they're not straight, and they meander and they turn. um, because I use the pendulum and I followed each one. Are there like just minor ones? Perhaps that's what I thought. There's probably some great big major ones and then minor ones as well. Or were they all just like disrupted and really destroyed, basically, or interrupted at that time you're talking about?
It could have been, and they've been working hard to keep the vibration down by doing these. They continue to do rituals, dark rituals
Okay.
on these, satanic ritual abuse kinds of things on these ley lines and false flags
Okay.
and things like that. So they're trying to keep that down because they knew it's going to happen. They don't want it to happen. They want to keep us fat, dumb, and happy and controllable. And if we're not controllable, they don't want us to exist.
Yeah.
So they've
Hmm.
thrown everything at us, and we're still waking up. So
Right.
that's very exciting.
It
You know,
is.
um, and I want to go back to what I was talking about in just a moment, but I want to
Hmm.
say that um, when we were talking before we went live, you know, I've met people through this work that have spiritual gifts like yours, working with biofield and tuning and healing, that just all of a sudden woke up spontaneously. And you said that's what happened to you.
It is, and
You
I
know,
always put it to, because the biofield is spirit. It's like we're taught, Eileen Day McCusick, when I took the class anyway, she was saying that she teaches technicians, how to do, physically do the things that need to be done and what to listen for, what to feel for, whatever. But when you get in and actually start the work, it's like, this is spirit. It's like, that's my only explanation, to me about how it works. It was like, wow. So,
and I don't have those gifts, but I do have spiritual gifts, and my mind seems to be intuition. And, you know, I see this coming to me through me as a well prepared vessel because of all the things that I said I was interested in, the hidden history and,
yeah.
the ley lines and, watching these dowsers giving their presentations on their finding and not being able to get enough. But that again laid the foundation for my later work, which really started in 2018.
And you've
2018
probably
was when it.
okay. And that's yeah, in 2018. Yeah, that would have been when I basically was starting to wake up too, for sure, in by 2019. But yeah, so there's something that really has to do in that time frame. And you've probably found, like I do,
Something
that
has shifted.
okay. Yeah. And you've probably found, like I have, that spirit, because you're connected with spirit, right? Um you're basically working in spirit through your intuition, and that's your desire, your passion. You're fulfilling that spiritual um, um, urge, that spiritual desire. And it's like I don't have time or knowledge to gather everything that I need to have at the right time. And it's like I have particularly two friends that it's like all of a sudden they'll pop up and say, "Here, you need to read this," or "Here, you need to watch this," and it's exactly what I need every time, right then. And it's just amazing how. And one of them's in the chat today. So, yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that was actually something that happened early on, years before I started waking up to this. So let's say 1994, and I'm gonna put 2006, 2007 as my real waking up to this. But in 1994, um, my first spiritual mentor, who was a poetry workshop leader when I was in high school. So when I was a freshman in high school through a senior in high school, I would go to her poetry workshops, and named Carol Peck, and she would go teach poetry at high schools and prisons and nursing homes. Really cool lady. And I call her a spiritual mentor because she was the very first person that started decide, because my family is as conventional as it comes. There's no reason for me to know any of this.
Uh-huh.
Nothing
I hear
remotely
you.
resembling this when I was growing up. Nothing.
Yeah.
To this day, there's no inkling
Right. I hear you. Totally. I
on
hear
their
you.
part. It's just simply not part of their awareness or belief system. So I had to get it another way. And Carol
Mhm.
was like the first person that started bringing that spiritual side of things into my life before I knew, before I had any idea what was going on. So she sent me the Celestine prophecy, and she sent me Bringers of the Dawn. And so this would have been about 1993, 1994. I know by 1994 because I had just read the Celestine prophecy when my husband and I were moving to Fairbanks for the first time. And that's a whole nother story. And I had a great uncle and aunt living there, my grandfather's brother. And my great uncle Carl was a huge gardener in Alaska. So he had a greenhouse and all these tricks he did to
Cool.
grow corn in the interior of Alaska and all this other stuff. So I read the Celestine prophecy, and it talks about the biofield, right? I don't know if you've ever read it or not.
No, I haven't.
And so it talks about a lot of things, but that was what was on my mind at the time. And I went into my uncle's greenhouse, and he had a little plant. It was like the least healthy tomato plant in the whole row of tomato plants. And I did what the book was talking about, your healing ability and all this other stuff. And so I went to that little plant and I set some energy. And the next day my uncle came up to me and said, "What did you do to my plant?" Because apparently it perked right up.
Oh.
um, so I had these little experiences along the way. And The Bringers of the Dawn by Barbara Marciniak um, was talking about frequency, this frequency. So I'm like the least if I didn't have the computer doing this work, I would, I wouldn't be the kind of person going out on the street with the sign, act as an activist.
Mm.
I'm not like that. I'm not a boat rocker. I'm not anything. But I sure as heck am with the work that I do.
Yes.
And I have to. Part of the
Right.
reason we're in this existential threat situation is because it's been hidden and covered over, and anybody that dares talk about it or bring it out, something bad happens to them. But I don't feel threatened by that. When I first started doing it, I was a little nervous, but I did it anyway. And I think one of the reasons I've been left alone on YouTube is because I don't monetize. And when helping me said, don't
Right.
monetize, they won't, they'll leave you alone. And I think that's why, you know,
Hmm.
I think I've managed to fly under the radar a little bit. I do get shadow banned. I do have a ton of ads put on some of my videos. It's not me. um, I'm hard to find, but that's been it. And I think it's because of that. They don't have a finger in my pie.
Hmm.
And, I think when you have a mission, the universe conspires to help you. And
Oh,
I really feel that,
absolutely. Yes.
that just keep putting one foot in front of the other,
Yes.
because it's like I don't talk about everything I know. I mean, other people can talk about the horrible, horrible things. But I know what I've been given to get out is important. And so I do that. And leave the people, looking at the more unsavory aspects of the world and things going on. Um, and if it comes up, I mean, every once in a while it'll come up as a part of what I'm working on, and so I'll touch base on it. But it's all part of it. And if it wasn't coming from deep inside of me, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
This is
Right.
all, this is all information that I've received over the course of living my life that I present in my own unique way.
Well, I totally agree. I mean, because that's what happens to me. And like, even more than the ley lines, I'm really, really passionate about the giant trees. It's like real soon after I started waking up, I started having these visions about the trees, and then I added spiritual hypnosis to it to experience what it was like in the trees and different things, and then it was like I was talking to one of those two friends I talked about, and she was saying something about the giant trees, and it was like all of a sudden that was the piece. It was like that's what the trees did. They were like a biofield tuning. They pulled up the crystal energy and broadcast it all over, and it was like to purify us daily if we held the intention to do so. That's what I've been shown, from the spiritual or the energetic side of it and stuff. But I
Yep.
wouldn't have put the pieces together if it wouldn't have been for help of other people that are seeking truth too. Yeah.
Yep. And that seems to be what's going on here. It's like it's bubbling up from the grassroots, and it shouldn't. We should not. It's been removed by the establishment deliberately so we wouldn't know and we could be controlled.
Yeah.
And so what results from that is, different people doing great research coming from different perspectives. We have some overlap, but it's not the same. And people are hungry for truth and information. And you've got one person saying one thing,
Hmm.
you know, and like I said, I couldn't do this if it wasn't coming from deep inside of me. And it
Right.
is. I couldn't. I
Yes.
would not have the motivation to put out the content that I put out every day. I'm working on it. And the last one I did took me about a month to do because there was just so much coming up. And I was working on it every day.
Are you like
Um,
me with your passion and stuff, though? You feel so driven at times that I forget to take time to have fun. It's like, and I get bogged down trying to get it done because there's so much to do, and I'm the only one that feel like I can do it in the way I'm doing it, and it's like I need to take time for fun more.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, but like maybe not. We'll see. Fun for me
Right,
would be
right,
going
yeah,
exploring
yeah,
and finding things here where I live in Prescott, Arizona, which is like where the old West meets the old world, and there's just so much here. Um,
yes.
to me, that's fun. I
I
really don't
agree.
have any connection with this world, so I don't enjoy what's put out. I mean, Prescott would have the boot drop for the New Year's celebration tonight. No
Mhm.
interest, none. Go have fun.
Yeah.
um, so there's that aspect to it. But the trees, I'm sorry, the giant trees weren't on my radar until Chad Williams with Deeper Conversations with Chad said, "Hey, Michelle, we need to talk about trees." We had a great conversation with our different styles of research. We were finding the same things. And by the end of that first conversation we had about trees, I'm like, okay, I see it. And now I see it everywhere.
Mhm,
And I've gotten research suggestions from people that have taken me further. So the trees took me further with my research, especially with the energy grid and what it really looks like happened here. I did not start out having an opinion about the shape of the earth, but I believe we're on a plane.
mhm,
I think earth was like grand central station of the universe and very important. I think
mhm,
the kingdom of God was on earth in physical form. And we were
mhm.
co-creating with our creator this beautiful harmonious civilization that was the real Israelite, the real tribes of Israel.
Yes, yes.
And then when the controllers gave us the new narrative, they separated everything out.
Yeah,
But they weren't separate. They were
yeah.
not separate concepts. There were Christian, Jew, Muslim, same. But they gave us
Yes.
organized religion.
Yeah.
It gets to the denomination, another way to keep us apart.
So do you think the
And
trees were cut down at the same time as this ley line thing, or was that done
I,
earlier?
I think okay, there's two aspects. One is I think the master builders of this original civilization had a symbiotic relationship with these giant trees, which were part of our energy grid. And I think they
Mhm,
were the magnetic field of the earth and not the
mhm. Right.
that we're taught.
Yes,
And when you
absolutely.
really start digging down into it, because our science is hung on this spinning earth, you really question that science.
Yeah.
That's, these things lead to questioning everything we've ever been taught about this
Mhm.
place. And they don't really care that we know anything. They just want us questioning and at each other and, you know, dividing us by race and religion and all these other things. And we're actually all brothers and sisters. We're
Yeah.
all cells in the body of God, consciousness
Yes.
cells. And that was an early Ken Carey. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. The Star Seed Transmissions, Return of the Bird Tribe, and Third Millennium. And the Return of the Bird Tribe was one of those books that kind of said, "Read me."
Mhm.
And so I read it, and I'm like, okay. And it was his books helped me understand that concept. That we are cells in the body of God. And if our cells fought each other, we'd be dead.
Yes.
We
Yes.
can't survive if our cells are not working together. And so that's kind of what they've brought into this element of, you know, elements of the same being with incredible power that we don't know that we have,
Yes.
fighting against. So we've created this world that they've set set in place for us, and they've maintained it by lying to us all the time and gaslighting us and abusing us. And that's kind of where I was going when I was talking about what I'm getting ready to put up on YouTube. Um, it was a comparative analysis of the Bronx in New York and Sydney, Australia. And
Okay.
2.5 hours of video. That's a long video for me. I mean, that's like 500 slides.
Hmm.
Um, it took on a life of its own, and a lot of stuff came out. And I knew from my friend Aaron's research that there was a Kirkbride facility in Sydney, and so I asked him to, you know, draw a line to the Bronx from Sydney, from the and he did it from the insane asylum, and I tracked the screenshots from Sydney to the Bronx, and then you get into North America, especially the Midwest going east. You've got all of these insane asylums around this alignment.
Huh. Wow.
And it's worse than anything you can imagine. Some of the stuff I didn't put in there were some of the things that they did. I mean, I talked a little bit about electroshock and lobotomies,
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know it's terrible.
but
But so,
there's
but
the instruments of torture. I mentioned the Inquisition earlier, and then you think about Nazi concentration camps. I think were doing the same kinds of things in these facilities, and
yeah,
invariably they're haunted if they're
sure. Well,
still
yeah,
standing.
yeah,
And
because
most of them, some of them still have like a section used. They're huge, massive buildings,
mhm,
and um, a lot of them are just like rotting. They're abandoned. There's graveyards. There's ghostly sightings, paranormal tours. That's what they've been doing on our ley lines, at least
yeah,
since the mid 19th century.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't know what the modern ones are doing, but there was definitely a period of probably 100 years between 1850 and 1950 where these things were actively traumatizing and hurting people. And
right.
so and abusing and all the things that come along with it. And
Well, and
so
like you said about being haunted, I mean, I find that some in my work that, if there's a huge trauma of some kind, especially, sudden death because of trauma or a lot of uh, pain and things, especially um, keep the person right there where they were, where that happened to them. Um, oh, I forgot my train of thought. But, oh, I know. I've at times soon after I started doing ancestors, it really came on my heart to help through the Catholic Church, the stories you hear of all the um, uh, nuns or children, women who have suffered at the hands of the popes and children who have died and things because of that. And so I had set my intention for a few weeks, and that was my intention to really connect with that group of people and offer my house to come transition to the oneness, my energy to boost their energy so that they had the voltage they needed to do so. And it's like they came, right? And so I'm going to hold that for the insane asylums that you've spoken of. And
yes, yes, absolutely. And I'm going to answer Jay's question. They were in original old world buildings. They were not constructed by Kirkbride. We're told that they were, but they were old world buildings that had a precise and specific function on the Earth's energy grid system.
oh,
And so by putting their so-called insane asylums, and I'm not sure what the heck they were doing there. I mean, it could have been nonconformist, and it could be original people. Um, I think the Civil War was actually about that. You know, covering up the old world and cleaning
mhm,
up and resetting during that time. Um,
right.
but these buildings were huge. I mean, they held a lot of people,
Oh, they
and
are.
and
Yeah.
so what that does, and other things, by having false flags on these ley lines and other kinds of things, and I'm going to talk about something here in just a second that's related to that, is that's lowering our collective vibration, that pain and that trauma.
Right.
What the
Absolutely.
controllers are doing is a concerted effort to bring us as a collective into insanity. And all
Mm.
you really have to do is read the newspaper. I don't read the newspaper or watch the news, but I
Right.
do
I don't
follow
either.
things on social media. And they, LGBTQIA plus W and ZY.
Yeah.
I mean, where
Yeah.
do the adults that identify as babies come from? Or as
Right.
animals? And that's being promoted. Are
Sick.
people
Yeah.
going into these facilities and having this trauma-based mind control to get them to where they are publicly going out in diapers? I mean, that's insanity. And that is what the controllers have tried to do to us collectively.
Well, it makes me
And
remember Jerry Merzinski. Have you listened to his work about how the in the insane asylums, or he's working in psychiatric hospitals, and how he's found that the some of that is definitely caused by demons in the in the
that's
person, attached to the aura, I'm sure, that are
that's what we're dealing
controlling
with.
that person. Yes.
That's we're dealing with a demonic parasitic consciousness. Bottom line.
Yeah.
And we don't know it. We've been convinced to think that's crazy.
Yeah.
But then you look at the world we live in today, where we're at, the evidence is there. And there's so much more to that topic, but that's the bottom line. And in this the next video that I have going up on YouTube and on my blog post, I really go into that, because that's what the research led to, was that deliberate mind control ultra of all of us.
Yeah.
So we could be controlled, so we wouldn't wake up, so they could install their one world or their new world order, and so on and so forth.
So do
But
you think
they're not
do
going to
you,
get away. Look, let me just say
yeah,
this because it's really
sure.
important.
Hmm.
We are waking up. They will not get away with what they planned on. They won't. There's too much going on. There's too many spiritual awakenings going on. Like I gave the examples, there are people that are just spontaneously waking up. There's
Yes.
there's light coming in that's upgrading our DNA and raising our consciousness as a collective. And there is, if you follow the Schumann resonance and all this other stuff, they don't have a chance. And they knew they didn't, but they gave it everything they had. So that this parasitic consciousness would have a host to be able to live. And that's, I think, ultimately what transhumanism is about.
Yes. Yes. I would agree.
They
So
they want us as cyborgs so they can just plug in. And we're like, not dying because, our consciousness has been transferred into this thing. And, that's kind of where this is going. Like I said, I don't see it happening. But
right.
but
Right.
that's what we've been up against, this existential threat. And as long as they can keep us at odds with each other,
So do you think?
miseducate,
Yes. Yeah.
misinform, lie, we don't look outside of that. And if anything, the human ego has presented so many blocks to our spiritual awakening, because we think we're separate. We think we're right. We think we have to be right. We think we have to have a one size fits all. And the reality is, love is the way out and up, and we
Hmm.
are all connected. We are a fractal of the creator. And if you look at holograms, and I like to give the example of broccoli as a good example for a hologram, because the stalk of broccoli is the same shape as the little crowns.
Mm.
It's a fractal. So we're like that. We're like that. That's
Yes.
the best explanation that I can come up with. We're all part of the same being.
Yes.
And so, you know, we have something of value in that, as well as our DNA. And so they harvest our DNA. They harvest our energy and they harvest our DNA, and then they experiment with it. And that's another horrible thing. There's so many horrible things that they've done. But
Yeah, well, there
that's
is,
another
and
thing. They're criminals. They are absolute criminals
they
that
are.
have committed high crimes against humanity and treason and everything else. And getting back to something we were talking about earlier, they they're arrogant. They mock us. They don't understand us. They don't understand love. They don't
Mm,
understand our
mm,
spirit and our love and compassion. And so the places that were hit with Milton, or it's not wasn't really Milton. I think they let water out. I think the massive flooding in Appalachia came from a deliberate act
oh, yes, I do too.
under the cover of the
Yeah.
hurricane.
Yes,
And you
absolutely.
see the government turning a cold shoulder and not, doing all these other things, but the
Hmm. Yeah.
people are coming together and helping their fellow human beings and donating their time and donating RVs and all these other things. That's that's our strength. In the face of disaster, absolute disaster and destruction and death, people come together to help each other out. And that's who we are. So we're living in that time when the veil is coming down and we can see,
Yes.
and they lose their power when that happens because we have to consent to this. And that's not the only thing that's going to help, but it is a big part of this, and that's a big motivator for why I do what I do, to provide this information. People can make their own decisions about whether it resonates with them or not, but this is what's come to me through my research and my work and my insights. And people can either take it or leave it. It doesn't bother me, but I just feel like it's just important to get this information out there because it's been kept from us, and the
So,
evidence for it's overwhelming.
right. And but so like just like, we're all the fractals, wouldn't the parasitic group, or that all be part of the fractals too? And so at some point they chose to turn, and because then, as part of truth, everything is working for our spiritual favor, it's because it can't work against us spiritually, because we're one, right? Because then it would. Do you see where I'm going? I guess it's more of a question than a statement. Do you feel then that this came at this time just so there would be the big awakening? Maybe it was lulling to sleep in other ways before, and so this was allowed. It was, yes, it was negative energies that chose consciously to do harm. They were using their mind thing, right, instead of their spirit thing. Were they? But they didn't know that it was the spirit that would. Well, do you think that's true? Do you think they're part of making it for our good, and that at some point they'll return to the whole too?
That's fair. I think so. So I really struggled with what has this been allowed? Struggled
Well,
a lot.
I have my
Knowing the
theory. Yeah,
well, knowing the genocide that's ongoing, um, the brutal psychological abuse and trauma that's been ongoing,
I
the
I agree.
lying to us
Yes,
that's been ongoing,
my
and they were doing it with it. Let me just finish the thought.
sure,
They were
sure.
doing it with impunity. They thought
Yes,
they had it.
yeah,
It was locked down, no problem. We're never going to have to face justice or accountability. Well, guess what? They're being exposed more and more every day.
yes, yeah.
And I just want to answer the fog question real quick from
Hmm.
Wild Woods, Kimberly New World, or Wild. What? Hi, Kim. Hi, Kimberly. um, about the fog. Okay, so they still have something, and maybe it's not for good, maybe it is for good, because I personally believe we have help here. Um, whether divine intervention or galactic federation help, I don't think we're here by ourselves facing this evil. And so part of it is our awakening, part of it is this. So if the fog is from the bad guys, they still have a few things in their arsenal.
Hmm.
With as deep as they got into everything, unfortunately, I don't think collateral damage was avoidable, even though
Hmm.
it's painful and sickening to watch. The shootings and the fires and the like the East Palestine gas thing and Lahaina and um, there all of the places that have just been destroyed and leveled within the last couple of years that I believe were from the bad guys.
Yes. Yeah.
They had a lot of stuff in place, but they never thought they would ever be held accountable for it or see or that it would be seen, and they can only get away with it if we don't know about it. So that could be the fog. The fog could be something else. I don't know, but I have seen that referenced in social media within the last week or so. We're talking about this
Mhm.
this fog. It's not where I live in Arizona, but I was talking to somebody on the phone in Oklahoma on Saturday, and I guess actually on Christmas Day, and he was talking about the fog. So I don't, I think we're turning a corner. I think this year is going to be a big year for us, and it may be a little weird before it gets better, but I do believe the new good things are coming in and more exposure and um I think this year things are going to really start to pop.
Yeah, I
But
think so.
they did get in really deep, and that's why there was no easy way out of it, because it was in every, I mean, their tentacles are in everything.
Right.
And so really to get to the truth, you just have to let go of everything you've ever believed to be true.
Well, and that,
Um,
yeah,
it's my experience.
that kind of goes along with what I was saying about, it all working for our good, or that's used to be part of the good and now it's the bad. And so, you just use those terms, and at one point maybe then they'll return to that. I think, I don't think necessarily like it's allowed. It's because this spirit, this consciousness that we call God, right? That's who it is. That's that love and gratitude and joy, that good base is who it is. And I see it with a line of abundance and freedom, right? And it's so, because that's part of that all perfectness, all goodness, then it can't, because we're made of it, it does not stop us from whatever part of us making those choices, because then it would be controlling and it wouldn't be the abundance that it, or the freedom that it's made of. So I think it's because it's integral to who, of understanding who that consciousness is. That's my theory.
And getting back to your earlier question, so there's the hero's journey,
Hmm.
and I think we've been experiencing that, all the challenges, but the hero wins in the end. And then the phoenix comes back to life after, basically perishing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, spiritually, I think we're talking about that. Um, Before I learned about how dark the dark was, which I learned about between 2012 and 2016, like I said earlier, I woke up to unity consciousness by 2012, and I was following the end of the Mayan calendar like a hawk.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of it. And I don't know if you've heard of Magenta Pixie,
Mm-mm.
the YouTube channel and the collective that she works with. I saw something that she put out, and I want to say, I'm not sure what year it was. Let's say with the last 10 years, um, about when when that time ended, December 21st of 2012, they lost the keys that locked everything down in
Uh,
this YouTube video that I was watching. So the locks changed, the keys, so they no longer had had this control.
okay.
And so like I said earlier, things shifted. Things have definitely shifted. And as I was learning about unity consciousness, I was learning about ascension at the same time, human ascension. I'm like, oh great, this is wonderful. We're heading into this time and all's good and then I learned about how bad the bad was. I'm like, holy, it's like, oh my gosh. And then I start waking up to this ancient civilization. I'm looking, I'm like, am I the only one that's seeing this? And so that was around 2016. And then I'm like, how am I going to get this out to other people? And then it just kind of worked into synchronistically in many ways, synchronistically worked into starting to blog and then making videos in 2018. And then, I've been doing it ever since. And so part of the spiritual journey of this for me is with the idea of ascension and all of us being one, was that we have to navigate this time in love and compassion. And believe me, there's plenty of reasons for being upset and mad
Mm-hmm.
and angry
Absolutely.
and judgmental and blaming. And, I feel that all the time from the research that I'm doing. But that's not the way forward. The way forward is not to be in the same consciousness that created this. It's to go back into the heart and love and connectedness, and don't have to accept it, don't have to like it,
Yeah.
but as part of our spiritual evolution and getting back into unity consciousness and 5D kinds of things, that's part of our challenge as sentient beings living here right now, is not to go off the deep end and being upset and angry. And it's like, we can note it, we can choose a different course. But if we stay angry or upset or even worried that they're going to get away with it, which I'm not, I
Mm-hmm.
can still feel the anxiety as I'm talking about all they've done, but I'm not going to let that influence a belief that they're going to get away with it, because I do not believe that. And
Right.
that's another
Right.
message I want to leave people. I do
Absolutely.
not believe that they've got if they lost if they still had the upper hand, we'd still be on lockdown. That was their plan.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of things happening right now, but that's going in a direction of allowing the fear that they've conditioned, false evidence appearing real in our minds, instead of the
Mm-hmm.
abundance that you were talking about, that is our
Yes.
birthright, that was our original way of being for a very long time,
Right.
and tapping into that. So, we're blessed to be living in exciting times, as they say. Um,
It is.
there's a lot of things going on, and yeah, I mean, we do have help. We're not here by ourselves facing these evil demons, and they are demons. They're pretty
Mm-hmm.
scary
There
dudes.
are. There are. Yeah. There is. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. There's all
I,
sorts of kinds of negative energies and entities. Yeah. It's like it's a plethora, right? It's like I don't think there's an end to the forms and the identities or the energies, that they take or use and attach to us, right? Or attach to buildings. Like that goes back to some of the old world buildings, right? Like I watch my lunch break every week, and it's just fascinating looking at all the old buildings so closely. And how can we help the ancestors, right, who perhaps were destroyed there, right, were killed there? How and And if those entities or energies of some kind are attached in some of those buildings, like how do you think we can help them and help ourselves at the same time, of course?
There are a lot of people that are drawn to work with ley lines and grids in a healing way.
Hmm.
And, I know you've got your own techniques, but I would say just do what you do,
Hmm.
and direct it. I mean, I had an awareness of the ley lines as a thing and real and very important to this world before I started learning about how they've been negatively manipulated
Hmm.
in the evilest of ways. And the true deep awareness of that has, how deep that goes has just now really coming into me, talking about with the insane asylums and things like that. But how bad it has been and gotten, we don't know.
Yeah.
But I was like everybody else with ley lines, as they're important and so on and so forth. But when I was doing active group work, and I haven't in a while, but my research pretty much takes me on most of my good thought time in the afternoon. My brain is mushy and I go and do other things and my eyes are blurry, and so I've got the morning to do this and then I got to decompress afterwards. But just sending positive energy and intentions and healing for the greatest good, highest need of all. So like if you focused on a building
Hmm.
or guided to look in a certain place, just send those kinds of warm healing energy through there, because we do have that ability. Our minds are incredibly strong.
We have forgotten how to use it, right? That was one of my
Mhm.
questions is like, I know through etheric connection with an ancient ancestor that I had at one time. He was in a group that did levitation, among other things, and the group was killed because of the spiritual aspect of the work. It was influencing people too much. What period of time it was, I don't know, but it wasn't, in this current history. And
Mhm.
so, do you think the old world buildings were built using that 5D stuff, the power of the mind?
Very possibly. I mean, they were so far advanced with
Hmm.
technologies we don't even know about,
Right.
levitation of stones, using frequencies. And I do think there was this ability to work with the elements, um, the positive applications of alchemy. And I think the controllers have used alchemy against us. Um, Mercury is an example of a substance that can be deadly or healing.
Hmm.
And I think
Right.
the controllers used the negative application of mercury in this new world, especially in clothing, hats. Mercury was used in the processing of hats. Um,
Oh, I didn't
Mercers,
know that.
um,
Huh. Oh.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. I
yeah,
hadn't put that together.
yeah, yeah. I am
Huh.
sure that they've been using alchemy against us. Sure of it.
Yeah. Wow.
Whereas the ancients used it for the good of
For
all,
good.
and
Yes.
a part of their
Yes.
construction. I mean, it's just the beautiful, ornate, intricate buildings all over the earth. And I think they all had
Hmm.
again. I think they all have specific function on this energy grid
Hmm.
that evolved from ancient to modern.
Yeah.
And then I think whenever they did this cataclysmic event, they manipulated time. We could be doing loops. That's why there could be different takes on what happened here, because they could be looping us.
Hmm. Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, I look at, you were talking about something a little bit earlier. Um, so the assisted living facility that my mom lives in Florida, she recently had a fall. I was there not too long ago. She had to have a complete shoulder replacement because she fell and broke her shoulder. So I'm there at her rehab facility and talking about where she's living now. And somebody said, "Oh, I heard it's haunted." Well, I'd never heard that before.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I found about these former insane asylums is a lot of them have been converted to other uses, like retirement facilities and things like that. Well,
Okay.
this place in where she grew up in Florida was supposedly a hotel, a railroad hotel.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
what were they doing in there for it to be haunted? You know,
Right.
what was it? Where she grew up there. This place has always been known as a former railroad hotel. It's been an assisted living facility for quite a few years, but it's like, what were they doing?
Right.
And not telling
Yeah.
people about. And then, there's just so many things just in s- this is a rural town outside of Tampa. It's like it was always kind of a small, sleepy town, but when I go there now, I just see the old world everywhere. But of course, growing up, it's like
Mhm.
I didn't see any of that.
Right.
And I didn't grow up there. I grew up in Maryland, but my we'd go down there. My parents were teachers, and we'd go down there for summer vacations or breaks and things like that. So I visited there a lot growing up, but I did not start seeing the old world there until I think
Interesting.
it was in 2016 when I was really starting to wake up to this, that I started noticing the pyramids and the
Sure.
earthworks and all this other
Yeah.
stuff that I didn't
So,
notice before.
right. So, when do you think that the giants, or those who are double our size, right, or more, um, when do you think they were all people that way? Do you think up until this cataclysmic event, and then we suddenly became smaller, or did they decrease in size at some point before then? Were they way far back? What do you think?
I think the giants existed up until this cataclysm. I think we were much bigger. And I think the giants are right below us.
Uh huh. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they were the cataclysm just ripped through the surface of the earth, destroyed it. They were wherever they were standing. Like you
Right.
see learned about Pompeii and the
Hmm.
supposed eruption of Vesuvius, and who knows what that was all about. Um, but people just wherever they were covered with mud or soil liquefaction or even potentially volcanic thing, because I think that's when the trees were destroyed. So to get back to that question, I'm sorry, this is a meandering kind of conversation, but um, so I think this cataclysm blew out the trees which were connected
Okay.
to volcanism.
Okay.
And that where I was going when I was talking before is I think the master builders used the trees. So a lot of places are like built on top of what like look like tree trunks, and I think
Hmm.
those are way pre-existing.
Okay.
I think the giant trees were the tops were blown off them by this cataclysm because I think they were all part of this energy grid. I think this
Hmm. Sure.
it was a directed attack on the grid system itself that I believe was a perfectly tuned scientific and musical instrument,
Yes.
and it caused a mistuning, and it caused everything to go haywire because a forced resonant frequency will cause destruction.
Hmm.
If you apply a frequency to a wine glass, a resonant frequency, forced resonant frequency to a wine glass, it will shatter.
Hmm.
And so my personal belief is that this was sent throughout the grid system. Things turned on each other, the lighthouses and all of this perfect infrastructure, and that the trees, I think, either a domino effect or simultaneously, don't know, that caused the trees to just. And then we have volcanoes. They've been explained as volcanoes, and there's this whole pseudoscience, in my opinion, to explain volcanoes and their existence and how they, the magmas and all this other stuff.
Hmm.
And and I think that's part of the spinning globe thing. If you really get
Yeah.
into it and you come to an understanding of this being a plane, the rest of it goes out the window because it's all based on you the spinning earth.
Yeah.
And I think the
Yeah.
trees were
Mhm.
part and parcel of our connection with our Creator here on Earth.
Yes. Yeah.
And that, especially when the trees were blown out, that was when the surface of the earth just,
Mhm.
sank. So we ended up with dunes and swamps, deserts where there weren't before, all this where there weren't before.
Yeah.
And then if you start, I've started to do some underwater research, and you find the same kinds of tree stump looking things. They are called geos or seamounts that look like the same tree stumps that we see on the surface of the earth, but underwater. And underwater volcanoes and things like that. So I think these trees were all part of that system that was taken out when the grid was destroyed. And then
You
we've
know,
been given this whole scientific paradigm to explain it,
mhm.
that when you really look at it, it starts to fall short. And everything else is like censored, and it's not accepted by the establishment, so you can't talk about it or question it. It is what it is. But again, it's another way of keeping people from finding out the truth.
Well, yeah, some of what you were saying reminded me of, in the Bible, it talks about in the Old Testament of people went to the high places to give, sacrifice things to the gods or things versus being in the low ground. I assume, and different from the high places where they went for the gods. And so I kind of think that all of the like we're only living in the high parts now, right? That the low parts, like you were talking about, that had trees, that was the lowland where people lived, and it was better weather and everything like that. And that perhaps with your cataclysmic event, or at some point, you know at whatever time, then but now that we're living just in the high places, I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things. One is, I think we probably were on a plane. That the
Mhm.
landmass was a plane,
Okay, yeah.
and so we didn't have the extremes in the topography of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
We probably didn't even have the oceans as we know them today. My guess is,
Right, right.
and it's not exactly an area of expertise. I'm just kind of piecing together from
Hmm.
the research and the kinds of things that I've found in where places I've looked, and finding railroad histories through swamps, and they want us to believe they
Yeah.
built the railroad through the swamp or the
Ah,
desert.
uh-huh.
It's like, you got to be kidding me. In the 1850s, when all
Yeah.
the insane asylums were coming online, there's just so many inconsistencies when you start really questioning the narrative and think critically. And so they don't want critical thinkers. Critical
Right.
thinking was taken out of the educational system around the same time, the formation of the Board of Education, and in
Uh-huh.
1850, 1851,
Yeah.
John D. Rockefeller's involvement in that. Um, Both the Rockefeller and Carnegie foundations have been closely involved in what we learn in school, mandatory attendance. So we have to learn their stuff, again, starting 1852. Um, we have to learn their version of history. It's in our books, it's in our movies, it's in our music. You know, to this day, whatever comes up spontaneously on my on my browser feed is more, reinforcement of what they tell us, what they've always told us.
Hmm.
Um, and so we've got that aspect of it. Um, I'm sorry, I got lost my train of thought. But there's just, what was I talking about, Carla?
Well, I'd asked you about the lowland versus the high
Okay,
places that the Bible spoke of. Hmm.
so let's just say, we could very well have been on a plane, and that the
Hmm.
cataclysm brought the extremes and the
Okay.
oceans and things like that.
Hmm.
But then another
Yeah.
aspect that I'm curious about, because it is in the Bible, is the firmament.
Yes.
And so, if we've got this dome, and they're telling us about all of this space stuff that's coming in,
Mhm.
asteroids and things that cause these like craters on the surface of the earth, and yet maybe we were in this climate controlled place,
Hmm.
protected, and all this other stuff is just their attempts to explain what we see, and
Hmm.
give us their new narrative.
Right.
And again, that's going kind of into an area that I would not consider as an expertise, but it's just questions that I ask. It's like, okay, well, if this isn't true, and how do you sift through all of this, these layers and layers of stories that we've been told? And again, I don't think that I don't really think the controllers, the former controllers of the world, care
Oh,
about what
right.
we think and our beliefs and what we're taught. They don't
Right.
care.
Right.
Earth's flat, Earth's a sphere, and getting the back and forth going about that. And it's like, they just, want us to have that disagreement.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's true too. Yeah. Like yeah, pitting two sides
so
against each other.
let them believe what they want to believe. Um,
Yeah.
but there's just a whole lot of questions that come up. And I kind of want to go back to, so Wild World, Kimberly. I don't have a map on Washington State in particular. I have done research through there. I know the ley lines are there. Um, it's hard to find the information. I was guided to find what I call the North American star tetrahedron, which is like kind of like big picture alignments. And then I tell people I found that. All these tattered pieces of paper here. So this is how I got my start in it when I moved to Oklahoma, or so between 2012 and 2014. I'm starting to wake up to this, and I was visiting. I had some travel friends. I was going to Unity Spiritual Life Center in Oklahoma City at the time, and so my friends and I would go traveling to different places, and I'm starting to wake up. And one of my friends was a Moorish American, and that's how the Moorish information started coming in. But my original finding was what I call the North American star tetrahedron.
Hmm.
Um, so by that time, I had known about sacred geometry. I was able to find the shape. I knew enough about the ancients that I knew they were precise, and so I extended the lines out, and and then I wrote down cities and places that lined up in lines. And I've
Hmm.
got, like, I don't know, a bunch of pages here, 18 pages here, um, from that initial work that I did, which was in 2016. I have not done very much since then, but this is where my original research started, and
Hmm.
it's been incredibly productive. I think that finding that shape, what the star tetrahedron, the sacred shape of this star tetrahedron in North America, also known as Merkaba, the same shape as our light body. It's like the 2D version of our light body, and our light body is like our holographic connection with everything in our energy field.
Hmm.
And and so that's where it began. And then the process of tracking these alignments, I've just gotten an incredible amount of information back. And so I know a lot of people have questions about their validity, in the whole globe versus flat earth thing. But I feel it works both ways, that the ley lines are what's important, and that this advanced civilization is just, based on sacred geometry built out along these lines, but that it corresponds with the heavens. It's like the earth is a terrestrial mirror of what's up in the sky. And
Hmm.
that's what they were doing. They were bringing everything into balance and harmony.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to say that, Kimberly, because I don't have a map specific to that area. Um, Sometimes it's possible to find things just by looking at, like, if you look at Google Earth and you just pick a landmark, like if there's a courthouse or cathedral, church, and just draw it out from like a big point, a landmark, and just see what lines up. is probably the best suggestion that I have on that one, because these ley lines have been suppressed by the establishment. They don't want us to know about this, and so the information is kind of sparse. Um, but there are people that are definitely intuitively connected to this, and so I don't know if that helps. If I come across something, I will definitely let you know. Um, and then as far as the mounds, I think the mounds were part of the grid system and like connectors. So if you look at
Hmm.
golf courses as mounds, they're also called another word for golf course is link. And I
Oh,
think they were
right.
actually links
Oh,
in the grid
interesting.
system.
Huh, interesting. So are the mounds, have they been dug into and stuff? Do you know what's in them, or is it rock formations that would be that link in the uh, electric currents?
I believe so. I mean, it's all part of it. I mean, it was perfect. I mean, it was generating free energy through this whole entire system. All the railroads, the giant trees, the railroads, the canals, the cathedrals, the lighthouses, the organs, the cathedral rose windows that are like frequency shaped windows,
Yes,
especially
yes.
solfeggios that would be, sending these healing frequencies out. And I, when talk about the Earth as being like Grand Central Station, I think it was of the Earth, because I mean of the universe, and that these frequencies were going through these gigantic bell towers that are really really tall. I mean, why make a tower so tall? And I think
Hmm.
you know they were being broadcast out there to help with harmony and balance in the universe.
Yeah.
Um, so there's just a lot. Um, and I see the comment about a great grandmother dying in one of those facilities. I think the thing about the whole insane asylum story is that I can't relate on a personal level, other than what I just said about my mom being in a haunted assisted living facility, which it's like, oh wow, it's starting to come together. It's like, what were they doing in there? Um, People can connect to having a relative or somebody that they knew who would have been in one of these facilities. And because they don't tell us exactly what they were doing in there, we really I think that's a whole nother can of worms as far as our story in the last couple of 100 years. Um, but it doesn't have to be our future, which I don't. Again, I don't think we're there. I think the energies are supporting us. I think the positive beings are here supporting us too. There's
Hmm.
just way too much going on. Um, but the fact that we're waking up, considering everything they've done to us, is just a miracle. Talk about the mercury and the clothing, the poisons in the food,
Yeah.
you know, bringing it into our culture. You go to the ball game, you drink beer with your buddies, you go to the movies, you eat junk food.
Yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
promoting allopathic medicine and Western medicine and big pharma over natural medicine and allopathic medicine and frequency healing and things like that. I mean, they've just thrown everything at us, and
Well, in
it
the
has
same
not
way,
kept.
yeah, with gardening, right? Everybody would have used to have grown a lot of their own food. And um, I think you can, in many ways, infiltrate's not word, but involve your own DNA into the plants as they grow, so they can pick up the energy tabs of your DNA. And so it's specifically made for you, right? For healing. And thankfully gardens are becoming more of a thing again, but people didn't for ages unless you lived out in the country. No one in town learned how to garden at all.
Are you familiar with the anesthesia books?
Yes. That's what I was thinking
Anastasia,
of. Uh-huh. Hmm. Yes.
um, Ringing Cedars.
Hmm.
It's a series, what, 10 books, give
10
or
or
take.
12. Yeah. I'm not
Um,
sure how many. Yeah.
I read the first one, and I was so annoyed by Vladimir.
Yeah. I know.
I was just annoyed by Vladimir. He's the guy that wrote the books. Um, he was kind of a typical macho,
Yeah.
stereotypical guy in the first book, especially.
Hmm. But she
But
could feel his
Anastas
spirit, right?
right,
Somehow she
but
knew he was
Anastas
the one.
exactly. So Anastasia, who is one of the Vedus in Siberia, so I'm guessing she's one of the ancient people there, lived in this incredible relationship with nature in
Mhm.
Siberia and just had this, you know, one-to-one relationship with the animals, the bear, you know, ch- there was a
Mhm.
communication going on. And one of the things that was mentioned in the first book that I read, which is the Ringing Cedars book, which is the first in the series, is that we could put seed
Yes.
under our tongue,
Mhm.
imprint our DNA, and when it's planted, it provides a growth that syncs with us. That we have that ability, that relationship with living things.
And she also talks then about first thing when you wake up in the morning to rinse your feet. You've had them in bed and everything, so rinse your feet and catch the water in a tub, and then water those plants with that because that would also contain fragments of your DNA and that to add to the plants. Yeah, it's amazing. I've only read 4 books, and then I got busy writing my own book, and I haven't got back to her others in the series yet. But it's
I
amazing.
never got back to it, but so Anastasia. I mean, these are real people, and Anastasia is the character, is the woman. Vladimir is the author, and he told her story. And I don't know how many kids they had. I know they had at least one, so he became her partner. But he was a businessman from Moscow, and it's Anastasia, spelled like Anastasia.
Right. Hmm. Yeah, it's amazing that people could live like that. I mean, it was so foreign to us, right? So occulted was the truth that we could, and I've been waking up to that in my growth, in talking to the plants and the trees and the ground, and harnessing. Harnessing isn't quite the right word because that it's kind of like control, but integrating their energies and all the energies of the universe into mine to so I can live the best life I can, the life we were meant to live, right? Integrated with the universe.
Yeah. And it is a challenge because again, we've got the conditioning for the fear and the anxiety and the worry. And, I know that's something that I struggle with. Um, Again, I don't let it stop me from anything that I'm doing, but, it's always there. And so part of it is opening up, it's this releasing that and just opening up to the flow and the abundance. And in my case, I'm very blessed that that happens anyway. you know, every once in a while I'll get, money from some place I'm not expecting that I call money from God.
Right.
um, and the biggest was that when I moved from Oklahoma City to Arizona, to the Sedona area, I started it in Cottonwood. Um, the synchronicities just started happening like one after the other. And so my husband died in 2001. He had a catastrophic illness. His lost his kidneys and then his organs shut down. Very difficult time. And so I was widowed in 2001 when I was 38. Never remarried.
Wow.
I have a companion cat in my life for 15 years, and so he's it. He's my guy. And you know, fast forward to 2017 when I arrived in Cottonwood, and I went to the jobs office there in Cottonwood, and I marked that I was a veteran. I was in the service in the Army from 1982 to 1986, and I got a call back from the lady that worked there and said, I see you're a veteran. The veterans jobs guy coming in tomorrow. Okay, so I came in the next day, talked with him, and he said, I want you to talk to the veterans benefits guy. And I'm like, why? I never got in, I wasn't eligible for anything when my husband died. Um, we didn't buy into the survivor's benefit plan with his
Mm.
retirement, and so that didn't happen. And but I went and talked to the benefit guy. I had all my paperwork, and I got applied for a pension, a VA pension, which, you know, by January of 2018, and this was February of 2017. By January 1st of 2018, I was getting a pension.
Oh, wow.
Just out of the blue. I mean, I would not be surprised if my husband was, in spirit helping there, because it just wouldn't surprise me. But
Right.
because the window of opportunity was like that. I mean, had I not met with that guy that day, I would never even have known. And my husband was exposed to Agent Orange when he was in Vietnam, and so that was what caused his health problems. But so talking about money from God, that's that's
Yeah,
probably the biggest
absolutely.
thing that's ever happened, and that freed up time to where I didn't have to work full time to support myself, and um, gives me the ability to do this. Basically, it helps a lot. So,
Oh, absolutely.
and a lot of things have happened since then to support me in being able to do this. But it's like there is abundance, and I just feel really blessed that you know no matter what my mental state is, I still have this flow coming, and synchronicities happening all the time, and the awareness to act on them, and you know to enjoy the benefits of that, and have a basic grasp, like we've been talking about through this whole discussion, of how the universe works and how we're all connected, and where we're going, which I believe we're going back into unity consciousness. But until I woke up to how dark the dark was in 2012, 20, or even this whole thing that I'm sharing, I did not have the understanding at the beginning of my journey that we had already been in unity consciousness.
Ah, hmm.
I thought we were working towards it with ascension, but now I really have a deep understanding that we were already there.
There.
And
Wow.
we already, we were already in a cohesive, coherent body on earth that were working together to create beauty and harmony and abundance and just a great quality of life.
That is beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what that's completely what I see when I look at all this old
Yeah.
world architecture and all of it that's been destroyed. But they can't keep us down,
Right. Right.
or we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, or any of us, or connecting together.
Very, very awesome. Well, I'm guessing, Michelle, would you want to leave people with like a final, whatever you'd like to leave us with, a final thought of yours, or how to get hold of you or sign up for your Patreon, or anything?
But basically, my work can be found on my website, www.piercingtheveilofillusion.com. And then I take my blog posts and turn them into videos. And my YouTube channel is at Michelle Gibson 8946. Links to some books that I've written or been involved with, and other, like Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon, are all in my video descriptions of the work that I put out there. Lately, I have been interviewing people in the community that don't have a platform to share research, and if somebody's interested in that, I'm more than happy to work with you on it. to give you an opportunity to do a presentation or have a talk about your information. I did something recently with a gentleman who lives in eastern Oklahoma, and we talked about Fort Smith and Van Buren in Arkansas, which is huge. So anybody that
Okay.
feels like they have something that they want to share, you reach out to me, and happy to work with you. Because it does take all of us to bring this back. It's just way too much for one person. I do have different areas of research. I mean, I could do this forever and have information the whole time to share. But everything does seem to happen at the right time, and so that will be clear when it happens. So like what I'm working on right now, there's definitely synchronicities involved in everything, and I got this person in Australia said, I want to send you some pictures from Sydney. I'm going there soon to visit my family.
Mm.
A month passes and I get these photos, and then I already had pictures that this lady had taken around the Bronx. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just put them together. And it's like, oh my gosh, there was so much information contained just, looking at those different places that, I have no other explanation for it, except that the themes just all came together and showed the absolute similarities between the Bronx, New York, and Sydney, Australia, and a lot of other stuff too.
Very
I mean,
cool.
basically Sydney and the Bronx are like identical in
Wow.
terms of what's there.
Wow. That's awesome.
That's not even comprehensible with the
Yeah.
history that we've been taught.
Wow. And I was going to just say for anyone who's watching that doesn't know that you had a big role in the Old World Order movie too. I really enjoyed listening to you in it.
Thank you. I was blessed to be asked by Sean Hibbler to be one of the people that he interviewed. So
That was
that was a really cool opportunity that came my way through Sean and his work and his devotion to getting this truth out there. Just amazing guy. A lot of respect for Sean. And all the people that are doing this work, all the people that he interviewed for that documentary, and then everybody that takes that extra step to get this information out there. And more people are waking up and open to it. There's still a lot of, some people that are just like, that's
yeah,
too big of a stretch for me.
right.
Yes, we were capable of, it's like, and I'm like, we were not capable. But that's what we've been taught our whole lives.
Yeah.
Everywhere, every way you turn, that's what we've been taught, is what the narrative says.
Uh, yes. So I'm just going to tell people please like and subscribe to help me grow too in this channel. And Michelle, thank you so very much for joining us. And whoops, I did something. What did I do? I hit the wrong button and something disappeared. So um, there we go.
Well,
So
I'm so glad that you invited me to be part of your podcast, your first solo guest. And,
yes.
just really grateful for the work that you're doing with the ancestral clearing and healing. And sounds like something I could probably benefit from myself.
Well, I think we all
So,
can. I mean, we're made of our ancestors, right? And so I find more and more, their traumas that they experience, they're embedded in us. And there's even what I consider evidence enough for me that shows past lives, not just ancestors, but that perhaps we visited before. Because sometimes things show up that just it seems spirit is saying that that's what this is. And so we all learn together.
yeah, I just want to share something along the lines of what you just said. When I first moved to Oklahoma in 2006, actually, was when I first moved there. No. I'm sorry. My life is, I've got too many chapters in my life. 2006 to 2012, I lived in Fairbanks. And then I moved to Oklahoma from 2012 to 2016. So I connected with an energy healer when I first got to Oklahoma City, or in that area, and did a session with him. And he said, "I feel a choking in your in your field."
Mhm.
Like, okay, that's interesting. And so I asked my mom. I said, "Mom, did I have any problems when I was born? You know, anything irregular about my birth?" And she said, "No, you didn't. But I had my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck when I was born."
Okay. Yeah. Hmm.
And I'm like, "Wow, how did that
And
get
you
into
were
my
in
energy
her,
field?"
right? As the woman,
Like,
your egg, the embryo that became you was in your mom, right?
yeah.
It's just
So that kind
amazing.
of blew my mind,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible what we
and
carry with
really
us.
explains a lot of stuff about my mom. But yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it's there's these imprints and these things that we just have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
But I do believe that the ancestors are helping me with the work that
Mhm.
I'm doing. I
Yes,
do believe that.
I would believe that too. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
see,
Yeah. Very good. So I guess, Michelle, shall we go ahead and end there? And maybe when you discover other things, then you can come back and be a guest another time. And
it sounds
I would love
perfect.
that. Okay, great. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate you being here and sharing this energy as well as life and our awakening with this. So we'll talk to you next time.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.